All right.
Are we live?
I
I think so.
It's
Yes,
hard
we
to
are.
say some days, isn't it? I
hmm
feel alive.
Well, happy Ignite
Happy
Week,
Ignite
Doug,
Week,
and Office
and
Slash
welcome
Friday.
to Office Flash
Yeah,
Friday. We may run a little long because there's a lot of stuff. I'm gonna stay focused on
yeah.
security. What do you got rolling this week?
So many Power BI
So many
things,
Power BI
and
things
some Power Automate desktop, which is
and some
super
Power
exciting.
Automate, just general announcements on some.
Ooh, and a new
Yeah,
language.
I'm
New
very excited
language.
about that. That's probably my
Yeah.
biggest crossover news of the week between you and I, right?
We don't talk about languages too much on this broadcast, and we are
No, but
today.
we love development at the citizen level, and so we'll
Mm,
dig in on that. Well, you're up first, so I should probably put your content center stage. Let's roll like that. Look
there
at
we
that,
go.
like magic.
Yeah.
Um,
Woo. Cool. All right. So from a Power BI, most of my, I would say I've got like 75% Power BI today. Um, this great post from Arun talks about the general availability of Power BI Premium per user, which is now GA, which also comes with that a price associated with it, which is always people like to know
mhm.
that. So it is $20 per user per month, right? So the famous cost of Pro, which has been $10 per user per month since time immemorial, excuse me, please. Now, Power BI Premium features, which are all kind of listed here, come in at an additional $10 per month, which is, I think, pretty darn reasonable for organizations that, um, or departments that, therefore, that aren't really candidates for moving to a whole premium capacity. So this is fantastic. So for $20 a month, you get all the things, right? Automated ML, paginated reports, the enterprise features with the XMLA endpoint. Um, so this is, I think, really exciting. Every feature, right? So you can now do per user without having to go acquire a Power BI premium capacity, which is just awesome. Which is to me more about just democratization of all this. So what do you think about that, Doug? Are
I,
you
it's
does
not
that
my
get you
world,
going?
so but you seem really excited about it, and so I'm just gonna be like, that must be
Well,
awesome.
to me, as much adoption as I've seen of a premium over the past couple years, which is through the roof. There's it's still the more we can make it easy for people to get into things, right? I think it's better, and that's what this does, in my
Yeah, okay,
opinion.
that makes
Um,
complete sense to me.
so, yep. So this is good stuff. All right, this is another great thing because here's what this solves, right? So VNet connectivity, you can see it up here. Here's what problem this solves. If you have Azure resources that are that have the public endpoint removed, right? And therefore, you cannot access it over the public internet. You had to install a gateway. So you have a cloud thing
Mm.
over here, and you have a cloud thing over here, and in the middle, you have to like install this VM or have something running in IaaS that is a gateway to kind of connect the two. And basically, what this is doing is allowing you to do what makes sense is connect your cloud things to your cloud things, and without having to manage, install, update, maintain your gateway
That makes sense.
infrastructure. So yeah, this is just makes a ton of sense. It's great. This kind of walks you through the process, talks about the data sources that are supported out of the gate, also calling out that this is free during preview. I assume, uh, I guess that implies something about what it will be after preview, which is maybe not free. I don't know. All I know is that it says during the public preview it's free. I don't know that that says anything about what it'll be after the preview. But this is really, I think, great for people that are locking down and having mature Azure environments. And this is a way to keep your data sets connected. So this is awesome. I'll just touch on this one really quick. A new Gen 2 utilization app. One of the big things about when you take on a premium capacity is you have to monitor that thing. You have to really figure out what data sources and data sets are maybe dominating your capacity. And this is a new one for Premium Gen 2. And it gives you the ability to do things like chargebacks and just kind of monitor and make sure that you're running at capacity. So definitely check that out if you're running premium. Another premium preview here, Gen 2 auto scale. So this is one of the big things with Gen 2 is being able to go and auto scale up and then automatically kind of scale back down so that you can better take advantage of and cost optimize from that
So
perspective.
you got a busy business
So,
reporting season, your capacity scales, then the rest of the year you're not getting overcharged.
well, this can even be, day to day, right? Week to week kind of thing. So, could be last day of the week, something that's busy,
Yeah, fair.
right?
I mean, the cycles could be shorter. I tend to think of
Yep,
them as
could
like
be whatever
quarterly. Like there's always that time every quarter, fiscal results window or whatever it is. But yeah, you can have a busy weekly cycle. Whatever your cycle is, you can stretch it.
So absolutely. So this has been, we've been talking about this one for a while. Now it's available for preview. So definitely check that out. If you're using Databricks, this is awesome. I love Databricks. The adoption's been great over the last few years. The general availability of the connector. So the big thing here is not only can I import the data, but can I direct query? Can I do SSO, Azure Active Directory, single sign-on, pass that through, and get the data that I'm supposed to read based on who I am. So that is now.
So
GA.
Todd, is that fair to say that just keeps parity between Databricks and Synapse?
Yeah, I think it treats both as.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, we continue to make the investments in security and alignment around Databricks and Synapse, so there's no real feature parity. You make your choice on the best platform for you, or integrate all of them. And Power BI still is a first-class consumer and integrator for all of it.
Yeah, again, to me, it's about choice. So absolutely great point. All right, so I think this is maybe my last Power BI one. This is a really good one from a kind of enterprise perspective. We've had row-level security in Power BI for a long time. And one of the things that has been a gap between analysis services and Power BI, which Power BI data sets are based on the analysis services technology, is object level security. So we've had this thing in AS and Power BI with the XML endpoint called perspectives. That was really more of a user UX thing. It was not security. So you want to be able to say like these types of users should see this column and these types of users should not. So now you can go in and in your models, very similar to what you would do with row level security, go and define your roles and through DAX expressions, determine what they should be able to see or not see in that model. So this is a great way for model reusability, because before in the past, if you really needed the security around this, you'd actually have to have like a couple different models.
Is it included or is it a charge for thing?
This is, I believe this will require the XML endpoint, which tells me this is part of
That would make sense because of the compute overhead associated with the dynamic application of. Yeah. I mean, that's a complicated compute cycle we're doing to do dynamic inline security trimming, right? I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. I just want to make sure that's the bucket it would be in. I would expect it to be there. I'm good.
Yes. So yes. I as soon before you even said it, I'm like, well, he's going to ask me this, and I should have been completely sure. But yeah, I believe that's the case.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't. So I'd say prepare for that and enjoy your winnings
With premium per user, it's never been easier to.
That does tie into that. I mean, that does make it super easy to have that security feature now through a pricing model. It doesn't require.
Doesn't require.
I'm kind of glad those two events came together, or you might be like, you're trying to soak me for data security, and I feel like then we're not.
Yep.
I feel like that's a good thing.
Yep.
So.
Yep. No, you're dead on. Absolutely. So, kind of putting a bookend on the Power BI stuff. Yeah. So the COE Starter Kit, which we've talked about quite a few times, which I absolutely love, the COE Starter. It's to me like we call it a COE Starter Kit, and we have this disclaimer. It's like, okay, it's not officially supported by Microsoft, but to me, it's you need stuff like this absolutely too. If you have Power Platform at scale at all. This is a must.
Think about that cloud adoption framework visual we used to pull up all the time, right? There's all these things you want to do. You have a vision, your execution, and then down below there's this operations and governance line. Someone's like, oh yeah, that stuff. No, that's like that's like the reason you're going to be successful or not. It's the concrete foundation on which all of your digital ambitions sit is your operations and governance layer, or you end up insecure, unreliable.
So to me, like this stuff is not optional.
It's not optional. Now, the reason we say it's a starter kit is because where should all this actually land? In your service catalog tool, in your service management tool, right? It should be expressed within whatever you use. I don't care if you're ServiceNow, Sharewell, custom SharePoint list, wherever Teams things, Excel spreadsheet, like whatever the heck it is you use, it should tie in and integrate. And the cool news about this is it is a kit, it is a framework that you can actually do the last mile integrations into. But it's an excellent reference example of all the things that can be done. I just absolutely adore the work that's done here by all these teams and how open it is for you to make it become what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing about this being a starter kit too is it's extensible. You can add on to it as you're kind of saying there. So, so the thing that we've added here is we've added this DLP editor app, which is fantastic because maybe sometimes you're actually going back and retroactively applying DLP policies to an environment, and you kind of need to know what you're going to break potentially.
I got smacked by one inside of Microsoft.
Did you? Yeah, that's not surprising.
I mean, I had made something a while back, right? And it was testing to a surface area, and I had disabled it properly, but they still analyzed it and said we know it's disabled, but it doesn't matter. It's like you either edit that or we're killing it, like enabled or disabled. Yep. So I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it's not like the operation was impermissible, but in the manner in which I was doing it was not okay. And so our security guidance was, either fix this or we're going to block it. But they did acknowledge the fact that it wasn't currently active, so it wasn't like I don't know. I just liked how it was done. The granularity of how I was communicated with through automation felt very personalized to me.
That's a great point. And there's no way that we could have done that level of automation and governance around that without something like the COE.
Yeah. I just think, like I said, I felt very coached, like automated wise. Like I felt like, hey, look, man, we see what you're trying to do. You're not doing it right. Yeah. We know you're not currently doing it, and you won't be permitted to do it. But here's how you could do it. You know what I mean? And some resources for you. So I enjoyed that coaching moment.
Yep. So this is going to give you a really good. You can see through the GIF here that they're kind of going through and adding these connectors. Think of it like almost like a shopping cart they're doing, and then there's an impact analysis section where it's like, hey, here's all these flows and power apps that you're going to potentially break or diminish if you set this policy. So this is really, really big fan of this. Again, like that to be like that kind of thing. These are the things you're going to have to know as you're applying these policies, so you don't just kill your users without actually knowing what you're doing. So this is good stuff. All right, here's the big one. I think we might spend a couple minutes on this one. PowerFX. Microsoft is no stranger to languages. We have all the languages you could ever want. All right, we have C#, we have TypeScript, we have VB script, we have VB.NET, right? All kinds of. We have M and
Q for quantum. We get quantum programming languages.
Q#, yeah, man, absolutely. So PowerFX. So this is going to be very familiar to you if you've been working in Power Apps and Excel, which has really been the goal from Power Apps from the beginning. We're basically taking that scripting language that's inside of Power Apps and making a proper language out about it. And it's going to be open source. It's based on Excel, and it's built for low code, right? So it's kind of funny when we always say no code, low code. So that's what this is. And it actually shows some examples. I think it's this post where I'll kind of jump down to that. Oh shoot, it must have been the other one. But it kind of shows, here's some logic, and here's what it looks like, a lot of very expressive on one line of code, very Excel-like, and then here's what the associated like JavaScript would look like. And this isn't like to poo-poo on JavaScript. JavaScript has its place, but really it's not in the low-code, no-code space, in my opinion, and I think in Microsoft's opinion. So this is a really exciting thing. It's the beginning of a journey. Doug and I both decided as we were prepping today that we were both pretty bullish on what this is. We have a really, really strong heritage in creating languages and experiences for business users writing code. I mean, VB script and the languages and the scripting inside of Excel, along with the issues that they came with from a governance perspective, really enabled a lot of business to happen in the last couple decades. So now that we have things like governance and the COE starter kit and platforms and DLP rules, you are now enabling your users to do these things in a safe and governable way.
So the YAML wrapper allows source code management of this stuff, right? So amazing for that, right? For the capability. Now I've had some of my pro dev friends go, oh, right? I'm like, come on. The point is it's a convergence point.
Really?
I know. Wow. I reached out. I'm like, I'm excited about this, and they're like, well, if it's YAML, meh. And I'm like, okay.
Oh well, YAML. I cringe at YAML no matter what. But I mean, still, at the end of the day, I mean, you're enabling people to use tools that are appropriate for them
That's
to do
my
their
point.
jobs.
It's like
So
take
how's
a
that
take a
a bad
step
thing?
and acknowledge the moment of the ability to do source code management, check in, the rest of these things around the I'm excited for the potential of this. I hope, I have no insider knowledge on this at all, that Office scripts
Yeah.
migrate is very similar to this, that they sort of fuse Office scripts elements. It's not very
Hmm.
hard to cross over, in my opinion, between those two things, but Office scripts is still a little more VBA-like. And although this is there, I would like us to get to, if possible, I would like to get to one.
Well, and we've said on this show a lot of times, we've kind of encouraged people to kind of get out of their comfort zone a little bit too, and take on things like we've talked about, even just like JSON and GitHub and Git and your VS Code here. Don't be scared of this stuff, right? Allow
No, go have a little
yourself to
fun.
kind of
It's really fun.
dip into it. You're going to open up a world of possibilities, and I think you'll find too that it's not as scary um, as maybe some
I'll give
people
you an
might
example.
lead
My
you
new
to
team
believe, I
needed
guess.
you know how much I believe in metadata around documents and stuff, right? But I didn't want to have mandatory
Mm-hmm.
document properties for people. And so I wrote an automation layer for our team that when you create a new document, it automatically sends you out a nag notice that says, hey, this needs some metadata with a little it's actually an actionable message in Outlook that you can just fill out the metadata right there, and I'll write it back, to a flow sequence that does it.
Nice.
Or there's a little link in there so you
Good
can go
job.
hit it, or you can do it from within the Office document. It doesn't. I don't like mandatory properties when you're in the middle of doing something, but I need that property eventually. And one of the things you pick from is a project list that our team is working on. That project list is actually dynamically driven from another SharePoint list where we have a Power App and Power BI reports,
Okay.
and the entire thing is woven together into a portfolio management framework for our team. Every
Mm-hmm.
week, it sends a Power BI report of this entire estate and the current status blocked, whatever it is, to our leader, Jair, right? So, and every meeting that gets scheduled has an entrance point into our little Power App that has it, where we show all the documents, all the status updates, all the internal and external assets, and the members of the team, both internal and external. So when he attends a meeting, he's got one click to pull up an entire estate portfolio of the assets, content, discussions, internal and external resources for everything we're doing. It's
That's
great,
awesome.
and it took me, I don't know, maybe total of 30 hours of spare time to construct the entire custom solution for our team.
That's so killer,
It
dude.
really is. And now people are coming to me like, hey, I want to kind of use this maybe for our team. And I'm like, sure. Like it's just a handful of lists and some, you know what I mean? But it's really
Yeah.
transformative in the sense of how you without a lot of, I mean, the stand up time for
Well, and
me.
how many Kubernetes clusters did you
Yeah,
need to run
nothing.
did you
This reminds me of did you ever do Ruby on Rails?
Uh-huh,
And
yeah.
the first time you ran the Rails framework and it scaffolded up your entire CRUD interface and all the rest of the stuff,
Boom. Blows
and
it
you were
up.
like,
Yep.
oh, like that was such a nice thing not to have to do. You get to focus maybe on a different layer of things. I know this is not the same, but it kind of is the same principle.
No, but it's one of those things too where it's also like having an opinion. Like that's a very opinionated framework,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, well, thank you for having an opinion because now I don't have to worry about all this other
And I
crap,
mean,
right?
like the people who like custodians of that 37 signals, they make some pretty serious SaaS on Ruby on Rails, right?
Yep.
That's not
Yep.
a trivial thing. Like those people write code. So
That's right.
so anyway, I just and they're like we prefer to function at a different layer in the stack. And I think the citizen developer is yet another expression of that same framework.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say I'm really bullish on this. I know you are too. I think we're going to be probably talking about this a lot going forward over time. I think it's going to show up in more and more
I agree.
places. So, now's the time, I think, to dig in. I'm pretty
What
excited
Todd
about
said.
this. All right, last
All
one
right.
for me. I thought this was great. This was a little unexpected for me, but it makes sense, total sense. It really brings together two things that we're really good at, which is Windows and Power Automate Desktop. And it's basically saying, hey, you run Windows 10? Then automate all the things with Power Automate Desktop. So you have the ability, as from a license perspective, to download this, install it, and automate to your heart's content on your local PC. I think this is awesome. It's just a great value add for Windows users. So nice surprise.
I was very surprised.
Yeah. Were you
I
pleasantly
was.
surprised?
I think you
Okay,
could do
good.
lots of amazing stuff with this.
And don't forget too, you can automate web stuff, right? Which is what they're doing here, which is huge. So things that you just need to do that you're finding yourself copying and pasting a lot, or moving things around and files, launching apps, have at it. I think this is pretty cool. So, all right. Well, you know what? That's all I had. I took 20 minutes, which isn't too bad, I guess, for an Ignite week. But what do you got, man?
I'm going to keep it a little short, and we're going to unpack some stuff over the next few weeks that are a little more substantive in nature. So I'm gonna cut over and put I'm gonna start out with a fun one, and then we're gonna talk a little security. And so this is one where the Outlook team released some stuff announced at Ignite, and I don't know if you saw any of the stuff. We have the new Outlook calendar board, and so essentially, if you go into over scrolling, it's a problem for everybody. Am I a happy scroller? What am I doing here? All right, here we go. So hopefully the animations will play through. Boards let you, otherwise I'll reload the page and see if I can get it to go. Well, that page isn't responding. That's not okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So boards are a pretty cool functionality. I'll see if I can if it'll render the thing, and we can get back to it. Boards let you essentially, you can go try it out yourself. Go to Outlook at the web, pull down boards. They let you pull together a bunch of components like your tasks, your to-dos, your planner items, external calendars, and stuff all onto one mashup like Pinterest style calendar and to-do board.
Okay.
So it's really pretty cool for on top of that. The other thing they did was
for productivity. Is that a good?
Yeah, like for schedule board, like you can pull together all these different elements. Now there's a restricted number of things you can pull in, but you can pull in like all of your planners, your external calendars, like your kid's school calendar, your work calendar, task stuff. You can put in goals in there, like time goals and stuff for project goals, and it's really pretty cool. So I will see if I can get it to roll on by before we're out of here for the day.
Killer.
The other one was that in Outlook Mobile. Okay, well now it's just going to try and reload no matter what. It gave up on me. So let's see if the animation comes back. So you do the new board on top of it. Yep, there we go. So we're going to board. Come on. The joys of live show.
Were we just talking before we started about how just some weeks things just don't seem to...
Yeah, sometimes. There we go. There we go. So see how it comes in? It goes to board. It's waiting on this animated GIF to download. Then you get this board interface, okay? And then you can say add to board anything from task list, weather, calendars. This is very Kidda-ish, which is why I wanted you to see it. So then you could say, hey, I would like to view the month for the school events, right, on top of it. And then if you hover, you'll see like what's going on for the school event.
This would be the reason to have a screen on your refrigerator.
Yeah, right? Maybe, right? And then for add to board, you can put in like task lists, goals, locations, like all sorts of crazy stuff that you can put into, so your calendar becomes a little more interesting, right? And so then you got your flagged emails, and you get the gist now, right? For where this thing's going. So and then watch this one though. You can drag things between them. I know. Yeah.
Oh my.
So you're like, I'm going to go work on this, right? And then you can also set a goal, and you can do like just sort of personal goal stuff. So boards are pretty funky, man.
That's cool. I love the experimentation here.
Yeah, so it's funky, and then it says event created, and then you can toss it in, and so now you kind of got this interesting element of where you're at. The file one was pretty wicked too, where you can come in. So hopefully you get the idea of where they're going with all this stuff, and I was like,
widgets, man.
Yeah, they're widgets. So there you go. There's your jam for boards. Now,
well, and honestly, like I've got a whole screen on. I mean, just to kind of validate this, I've got a whole screen on my iPhone that's just kind of like this, where I've got widgets from apps and to-dos, and that's like I need to see my personal and my work stuff all on one screen. So this is absolutely a need.
Yeah, let me give you one more. How about an Outlook mobile scheduling with a bunch of AI powering for suggested times, so you're not trying to look up the calendar views for things. So you say, hey, I need a 30-minute meeting. I want the earliest time. It shows you when you can get it. You do a find time, and it comes back on mobile.
He's still my heart.
Right? Oh my gosh. I wanted to call up with that one to give a little love to like the schedulers of the world, right? The people with busy calendars and lots to do.
This is so hard and exhausting. It's tedious, terrible. And
so this brings together two nice time management and productivity features, which I sort of love.
Killer. That's really wonderful.
Okay. I know this is. I'm gonna do a little setup. If you've never looked at this, you should. This is the super exciting federal ICAM, the Identity, Credential, and Access Management Architecture version 3.1. This is a very useful and thoughtfully produced approach to identity and access management that supports the NIST access frameworks and the governmental regulations and a whole bunch of other things on top of it. So like you read through a NIST 853 or some of the other things that you have to go do, and you're like, yeah, but there's a list of to-dos, but how should you think about it? Does that make sense? Like, what's the philosophy behind this stuff? And if you think about like the security triangle of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, like how are we doing that, for our identity, credential, and for access management in this particular case? So they've sort of morphed the CIA triangle from the actual CISSP and sort of sublayered it into identity, credentials, and then access management. But they talk about the principles of identity management, credential management, access management, federation, and governance, and the things you need to go look at for any given circumstance. And hear me out, because Ignite relates a lot to this, right? All the announcements we did.
All right.
So you think about identity management, you sort of unpack that box. There's creation, proofing, provision, maintenance, aggregation, and deactivation. Right? Mm-hmm. You think about credential management. There's all these different things around sponsorship, registration, generation, issuance, maintenance, and revocation. Right? And there's a lot of things about some of these things that maybe we aren't involved in. Like Microsoft might only be the access management, or we might only be two of these boxes because the other ones are actually a business process and a set of business rules that you're going to run. Right? They're unrelated to technology. They are about how do you decide when you showed up for work. How did Microsoft decide you were really Todd Kitta? That's not a technical process. The technical process said once someone says you're Todd Kitta, how do we issue these credentials and ensure that once we've established it's you, that it really is you on an ongoing go-forward basis. So.
I mean, you just don't believe me? Like, I don't look like an honest person?
What do they really have? You come in with a driver's license and your social security card, and you're like, that's good. Right, it's you.
Yep.
When you think about how you do digital credential verification and a whole bunch of other stuff, it gets a little dicier. Like let's say I was involved in some supply chain work during the COVID crisis and for large governmental agencies, right, in my previous capacity. And so there's a large group of government consortiums, and they were like, let's say someone says they're the procurement officer for the state of Minnesota. Are they? How does one confirm that? What's the process behind doing it? And how do you understand that that's really a hospital system and not someone just trying to get access to a bunch of vaccines? Like how do you know it's a nursing home? How do you so there's a lot of challenges around these sort of foundational principles and the roles people play and the participants. And technology backs this. And so we had a whole series of announcements that strengthen your ability to execute complicated ICAM and to reduce your surface area and improve your access management that, in my opinion, supports a richer alignment to a really good ICAM architecture.
Okay.
But I want a customer to have an ICAM architecture before I talk to them about technical controls and capabilities and whiz-bang features. It's like I want you to have a security policy and a user access policy so I can align the technical and coaching controls around those things. I want you to have thought through ICAM. I think it's a super important thing for you to consider. What tooling do you have? You got to draw a little gerrymandered line. What do you use for what? What are your processes to back these things up? When you say you want to have a partner come in, they want to join it in, so you're saying your employee's invitation is enough of an authorization of that person that they are who they say they are. And maybe you're relying on the suffix of that company, and that means you're relying on that company's IT staff. I'm fine with that as long as you said you're okay with that. I want it all to be intentional.
Yes.
And so these are super cool features, but the reason I've started with ICAM is to do what?
To make you not think about the features first.
Please. Because we made all these cool security announcements, and I could go over a million of them, and I'm going to go over a few, and we're going to run a little long. But if I do nothing more than to say, to you, please go pull up the ICAM architecture, and then look at the announcements, and look at your gap, and then pull the security features in that meet your regulatory, compliance, and security policy requirements. And if you're looking for what does thoughtful analysis of the process and the thought look like, for identity, credential, and access management, ICAM is very good. And so I just want people to think, oh, how have I thought about that? How am I doing that? What do I have in tools in this place? What do I need? How events do I integrate? Like, how do those events go back to my SIM for analysis? Like, how do we do these things? And the goal behind a lot of these announcements is to improve that on top of it. So what did we do on top of it? Well, we shipped a bunch of passwordless authentication, and temporary access passwords, right? So for improved, security of the access management, we shipped a bunch of Azure AD conditional access authentication context controls, where, oops, sorry for the zoom around. So you can do, it's hard if you touch the wrong portion of the screen when you're doing the overall on top of it, but you can essentially, I even went past where I was at. Here it is. So you get the authentication context where you can say, hey, look, right, for this specific application, I want to know the context of the user's session, right, and what they are doing within it and the kind of activities that are within. So we always talked about, the static access control and then moving towards risk adaptive access controls to say it's the posture of you in the moment, not just the posture of Todd at a time. Because Greg Kosky used to say that security is like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right? I can either know your position or your direction and velocity, but not both, because you're moving. And so authentication context help close the gap on Heisenberg, makes those two things closer, right? So you get more control over the context of the session where a user's going on top of that stuff. And so it's coming to preview soon on top of it. We significantly increased the number of applications that unify into the access management estate. We've been talking about the stuff for Azure AD App Proxy, which we'll get to in a minute. AWS single sign-on app is now pre-integrated to Azure AD and available in the application gallery, which that lets you connect to Azure AD to AWS SSO across AWS accounts and resources, again, allowing Azure AD to centralize the management for user access control through a singular estate. The Azure AD App Proxy service, which has grown crazy because we've started to secure more and more legacy authentication protocols and everything else, with the native header-based support on top of it, is now generally available, and traffic optimization for App Proxy, so you have regional hubbing, essentially, you can target it for it, coming in on top of that. And then we included the partnerships to DataWiza, Perimeter 81, Silverfort, and Strata. Hello. If you don't know, then go look at those things. It's a rationalization and a trim down. Greg Kostic did this really great post the other day on his, he did a public post on LinkedIn on his blog about like the rationalization of Active Directory domain services and how people are coming towards like how long it's going to take people to get off. So if you're thinking about, well, how do I get, what's my journey look like? Kostic did an amazing job of describing what the journey to get rid of Active Directory domain services might look like, right? And it's mostly about application context and integrations. The bottom line is going to take a while until you can rationalize those traditionally authenticating applications. But these kind of approaches, where you can do Kerberos constrained delegation, you can do header mapping, you do that stuff, allow you to rationalize and integrate. And we already have hybrid identity to close the loop on those applications. So it's going to take a while. Maybe it's going to take you a long while, but it doesn't mean you change your security posture. And as a critical part of that, we announced Active Directory Federation Services Activity and Insights reports, where we can now take the intelligence of the cloud and look at the authentications against ADFS on-prem legacy authentications that might be happening, right, through WSFed or other protocols integrated to ADFS.
Very cool.
And it talks about migration readiness. So it'll actually go through and do application activity assessment and the assessment of whether that application can be consolidated into cloud security points.
So just by execution and running in operations, you're actually
prepping for migration as you go, and you get a visibility and an insight into what's still using what, right? One of the things they were talking about with things like SolarGate is they were using and doing all these activities, but where is the telemetry going? And one of the first things we used to train people on, we had the security workshop Greg and I used to run, we would say to people, look, you need to go turn on audit logging for successes and failures in your ADFS environment and get it woven into your SIM tool if you're going to use on-prem authenticators, because otherwise you're denying, like a lot of people say, I'm still going to use ADFS and I'll have Azure AD, and they'd be like, how come I'm not seeing failed logins in Azure AD? I'm like, because they don't make it to us unless it's a replay. Right? Because Azure AD is only an authorization engine if you're front-ending it with Ping or Okta or something else. We're only seeing authorizations. Authentication is the responsibility. But then it's your responsibility to aggregate the SIGINT into your SIM tool or somewhere else. Well, now what we're saying is we're going to pull that estate in and give you visibility around it, which is pretty amazing. So
awesome.
I was particularly happy on top of that. So there was the announcements on top of that. For customers and partners, the Azure AD external identities is for securing and managing identity from customers and partners. Self-service sign-up flows in Azure have on top of that. You can integrate support for sign using Google and Facebook IDs and extend the flow with API connectors on top of it. So you essentially now have this sort of rich identity flow, again, in support of an identity ICAM-based identity access management framework, right? Like, what are you doing? What do you need? Let's bring all this stuff together. The automated guest access reviews for Microsoft Teams, and you saw some of the channel invitations for collaboration,
Yes,
right? And the team stuff.
Exciting.
Again,
That's awesome.
constraint, but that identity still has to be governed on top of it. And then Azure AD verifiable credentials is entering preview on top of it, which allows that we're partnering with some leading ID verification partners, Accurate, Identity10X, IDEMIA, Jumio, Socure, Onifio, View Security, all of them. Okay. So why would this be useful? I return your attention back to my favorite identity management architecture.
How do we know
you've got to go ahead and have all this stuff plugged in. And the canvas of rich integrations, first and third party, to do these sort of things. Because let's be honest, if we talk about verification, Microsoft's never going to do like background check identity verification for credential issuance as a first party service, or I don't think we are. I think that would be an unusual move for us.
Let's just put it this way: that would be
a very, very new and different thing, and kind of go against. Like, we're happy to have you. Go leverage those services, because those services have privacy policies and governmental authorizations and all sorts of stuff to do what they do, right? And the big one, the big fish, I think we're all in the pond over there. So why? But integration with it, because we're otherwise it's up to you to weave the fabric together. But now that we have the verification stuff in there, so I guess my ask, as you think about security announcements, compliance, everything else, is there's these layers of control. But we always say to people, do I know who you are? Do I know what you're trying to do? From where? On what? Against what? And am I okay with that? And then there's the other things that happen, like once you've proven it's really Todd, right? We used to call the game a clue. Colonel Mustard in the parlor with the wrench, right? Only it's a multi-dimensional game now. And these changes and updates allow you to play the multi-dimensional game of Clue better than ever. And I really want people to think about, what is your framework? How do our tools and your other tools integrate to support it? To consolidate into your investigation and alert command centers and your command and control fabric for doing that stuff. Everything else we're going to talk about the next few weeks about security announcements plugs into that construct. But I want to start here and say, let's make sure we've secured this estate as best we can, and everything else we do will be about what are people doing within the walls.
Makes sense. Okay. I mean, it might be a little heady for now because we're probably wrapping up, but my question is, this is all awesome, and this is your world, and I always learn and love hearing you talk about it because I always learn a lot. But my question goes to, if you don't have this posture to the extent that you've defined and laid out, which makes sense to me, like, how does one get there? How do they get started?
I think you toss this into OneNote and start enumerating, just like with arrows around the edge of it. What do you got? That's how I start the exercise with customers, by the way. I'm like, let's talk about identity management. Nice. Let's go put this box on a page and talk about what do you got and how do you use it, right? So when it comes to identity management, right? If you drill into that specific bucket, assuming the internet ever lets me paint my one of these tabs in, right? We had the little list before, you saw it with the blocks, right? Those are what I mean, you got to go unpack yourself and say, what do I got in my suitcase of this? Like, what tooling processes do I have? How good am I? And you just go through and assess, like, where are you at on top of it? And I usually start from here and say, right, because every time someone comes in, they're always after some sort of specific functional capability. I'm like, against what reference, architecture, approach, and policy are we executing this? And sometimes I get people like, and that policy comes from where? And they're like, I don't really know. You'd be stunned the number of times I've been in a room with a whole bunch of senior people, and I'm like, and what's the actual policy we're trying to meet? And people go, or where'd that come from? And they're like, well, we have it. I'm like, right, but who's the business sponsor of that policy? And they're like, yeah, I don't know. Some of them are like tribal knowledge. You know what I mean? Like they've been around for, everyone's known it.
I know.
I've been working here for 10 years and that's the policy. Right. Well, from where? Right. right? Now some people are very, very good, and if you are, and you can tell me, what do you already have? Because here's the other thing too. You're like, some people you come in, you get excited. We're like, we want to go talk to a customer about this thing, and they're like, I got 7 things to do that. Right? Like, how I got to rationalize this. Okay, let's have that discussion. Let's have the discussion about how do we rationalize? Which ones are good? What do they do? What is the overlap? Which features, whose thing should you use for what area? What's the best leverage data advantage? How can you do cost reduction, right? How can you get rid of tech debt? These are the substantive, if you can simplify your architecture, increase your security investments, or decrease your actual cost of security, and increase in your visibility and telemetry. Those are amazing things. Judson Althoff did a Ignite, one of the keynotes, and he interviewed customers, and it's really good, 30 minutes. I mean, I found it interesting because he was talking to real customers about why they did what they did with our stuff. Right, they're just little like 7 or 8 minute vignettes. Where he has this cool like virtual panel where he's interviewing them through a green screen, puts themselves in a factory or whatever it is. And I think it was Coca-Cola, but if I'm wrong, someone can correct me, who was talking about like their rationalization of their security stack, and they're like down to like 10 or 12 primary tools, right? Or maybe it was 20 or something like that. But it was like they were rationalizing their security investments to increase visibility, drive down cost, and increase responsiveness. And we should always be doing that. And so if my features overlap, then and you own them, now you have a rationalization decision to make. But either way, I just think we announced a lot of things to extend our support for a secure, compliant architecture. And I think people should first understand where their gaps are and then look at our capabilities that we announced to address those. Because I get super excited about these features because I'm completing the map in my head. But I guess the challenge for customers is, what's your map?
Yep, that makes sense.
I hope it does. Very I feel cool. Like I'm academically lecturing, which is, I guess I'm guilty of at times.
Well, I mean, it's a heavy topic, and it's a lot of work, but you have to begin. And that's why I asked about how do you begin? And you just kind of have to start creating that framework and thinking about it, and asking those questions you asked yourself of why, what policy, what is our...
Yeah, we can wrap that, but I think if you and I sat down, Todd Co. is a customer, right? And I sit down with Todd Co.'s, either security or operations team. I'm like, hey, let's talk about identity, credential, and access management, how you do external entities, and how you like to see governance and control. And we started saying, what are your primary, who is the people, the little racy on that, and what are the tools you use today, and what do you like and not like about those, and how's it going?
That's a great way to think about it.
You get a racy going, you get some humans, and you start putting depth behind the boxes, and then pretty soon you're like, hey, and then you add in the layers of, compliance and, anyway, so that's how I like to look at it. I just love this. This is, I shouldn't say one of the few, but this is perhaps one of the more tangible guidance to come out of, the work around NIST that I've been able to see that is, neutral and consumable, unless you're an academic wonk like me. Pardon me.
No, this makes sense. I think people can get
Which is why I saw all these cool announcements. I'm like, everyone can read all the cool announcements. Which ones should you pay attention to? And the answer for me is going to be, as we go through them going forward, I'm going to keep calling this up and say, these ones fit here. Right?
It would almost be like a nice little graphic to have. Like, this is where this fits in.
No, seriously. I mean, I think that for me, I'm going to try and provide as we go through some of the more deeper into the announcements, I'm going to go provide more context against these kind of frameworks. I think that will really matter for people, right? Because as we go through all these different features, and there's like, hey, hooray, and then you're like, yeah, but where should I spend my time? And the answer should be determined by a maturity curve and a value assessment against your reference architectural frameworks for security, compliance, governance, and identity and access management. This is one of those pillars.
So always through that lens. Yeah, that makes total sense. Love it.
All right, well, probably not, maybe it's not as much Ignite, but like I said, there were so many little announcements and so much that add depth and dimension to this pattern that I was like, I think I'm better off talking about the pattern for a minute, so I did.
No, I love it. Getting excited about features is one thing, and that's what you can do on the Power BI stuff. But it's important to kind of slow down and think about, how does this fit in? How does this mash up against our posture? And do we have a posture? Is it appropriate? Right?
Yeah. I love it. It was every time I've done this with a customer, when I used to do customer meetings, we always walked out with a much clearer understanding of what Microsoft did. And some cases they're like, why do you guys release these things? I'm like, oh, because we're responsible for this. They're like, well, we have something. I'm like, yeah, but this whole segment of the market doesn't. and they need this. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So, and I think it's just interesting to really explore with customers, like, what they need and what they already have. Because if you were to think about it, like, let's say your customer has, I don't know, Savient or something, right? And you're like, well, I already have, this portion of things. Right. Then we're just more the access management, right? And part of the identity management for integration and all that stuff. So, or you've got, provisioning from ServiceNow or something else. That's awesome. It's just, we need to have that pattern and understand how all these things should socket together for you. Or if you're maybe in a smaller segment, you're like, I need it all from one place because I don't have all those things. And then the rationalization becomes even more important. All right, we're way over. My academic stuff is done. I don't know if you've been watching any of the comments or if people care, but
I'm sure they care.
So we'll be back next week. I'm going to dive in a little more deeper on a couple of specific things around endpoint detection and response and some of the stuff that is more tactical security layer, command and control, and security operations stuff that we announced next week, to unpack those. But all the identity and access management stuff fit into here. So
cool. That's great stuff. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great weekend. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you stay safe and healthy and happy.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. It's going to be 60 degrees in Minneapolis this weekend, so I'm going to take it.
Wow, that's awesome. That's
not for March. You kidding me?
All right. Well, go enjoy that.
You all take care. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Take care. All right. See ya.